The man who sold his tomorrows. The village of Brackenford lay nestled between whispering woods and rolling hills, a quiet place where life moved slowly, measured by seasons, not clocks. Its people were simple farmers, bakers, shepherds, and craftsmen. Among them lived Adrian, a woodcarver whose hands shaped the grain of oak and ash into chairs, toys, and tools. His work was admired, but his life was ordinary. And Adrian loathed being ordinary. While his neighbors worked diligently from dawn to dusk, Adrian often leaned against the doorway of his small shop, watching clouds drift across the sky, sighing heavily as if life had cheated him. His father used to tell him, "A man's worth is not in his riches but in the work of his hands." But Adrian disagreed. He longed for more than wood dust and copper coins. He dreamed of gold. The villagers knew him as clever but lazy, a man who often promised to do things tomorrow, and then the next tomorrow and the one after that. "I'll finish it later," he would say with a shrug. Customers waited, orders piled up, and while his hands had the skill, his heart lacked the fire. One evening, in the smoky tavern that sat at the heart of the village, Adrian overheard a whisper that pricked his ears. "Have you heard?" A farmer muttered to his companion. "A stranger's come to Brackenford. A merchant, but not like any other. He carries things not of this world." Adrian leaned closer, pretending to sip his ale. "They say," the man continued, lowering his voice, "he can give you anything you desire for a price." Adrian's heart quickened. He laughed aloud, scoffing to cover his interest. Magic merchants? Fairy tales for drunk men. But that night, as Adrian lay in bed, the words gnawed at him. "Anything you desire for a price." He tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling. What if the story was true? What if this merchant could give him the wealth he always dreamed of? At dawn, curiosity consumed him. He wandered the alleys, searching. The village was stirring awake when he found it. A narrow lane where no cart should fit, yet there stood one. It was unlike any cart he'd seen. The wood was black as midnight, the wheels silent though unmoving. Strange objects cluttered its surface. Clocks with no hands, glass jars filled with shimmering sand, books that seemed to breathe when the wind shifted. And behind it stood a man cloaked in shadow, tall and still as if carved from stone. When Adrian approached, the man turned, and his eyes, faintly glowing like dying embers, locked onto him. "Adrian," the man said. The woodcarver froze. How do you know my name?" The merchant's smile was slow, unsettling. "I know every man who dreams of more than he has." Adrian swallowed. "And what do you sell?" The merchant's cloak rustled, though there was no breeze. He gestured to the cart. "Things that men crave. Wealth, power, glory. Not trinkets, but destiny." Adrian laughed nervously, though his palms had begun to sweat. "And the price?" The merchant leaned forward. His voice was low, like thunder whispered. "Not your soul, not your blood. I ask only for your tomorrows." Adrian frowned. "My tomorrows?" The merchant nodded. "Each tomorrow is a coin. You may sell them to me. In return, I will give you what you desire today. Gold, food, fame, anything. Tomorrow is nothing. It hasn't come yet." The absurdity made Adrian bark a laugh, but his chest was tight. "You mean, I give you a day of my life?" The merchant's eyes glimmered. "A day you will not miss. When you wake, that tomorrow will be gone. Time will leap, but today, Adrian, today will be everything you ever wanted." Adrian hesitated. Sounded foolish, impossible, dangerous. Yet in the merchant's cart, he saw gold coins stacked in a small chest, jewels that caught the morning light and fractured it into rainbows. He thought of his neighbors who mocked his laziness, of the customers who scolded him, of the meager coins he counted each week. And he thought of walking into the tavern dressed in silk, tossing gold on the counter, silencing their laughter forever. But fear held him back. He shook his head and stumbled away. "I'll think about it," he muttered. The merchant's voice followed him, smooth as oil. "I'll be here, Adrian." today, tomorrow, until your desire outweighs your fear. That night, Adrian could not sleep. The ticking of his small wall clock grew louder, pounding in his ears. He thought of gold, of riches, of respect. And he thought, what harm is one tomorrow? I have hundreds more. At dawn, he returned to the alley. The merchant was waiting, as though he had known Adrian would come. Well? He asked softly. Adrian's heart raced. He looked once more at the chest of gold, then at the parchment the merchant unrolled. I'll sell one tomorrow, Adrian whispered. The merchant's smile widened. Wise choice. Adrian picked up the quill. His hand trembled as he wrote his name. The ink spread like veins across the old parchment, binding him. The merchant snapped his fingers, and into Adrian's palm fell a pouch so heavy it nearly tore the seams of his pocket. Adrian gasped as he opened it. Gold. Real, heavy gold, more than he had ever seen. And so, Adrian sold his first tomorrow. That evening, he walked through the village in fine new clothes. The poor woodcarver was gone. Strangers stared with envy. He feasted on meats dripping with fat, drank wine until his cheeks flushed, and filled his home with treasures. He slept content, dreaming of the empire he would build. But when morning came, something strange occurred. Adrian opened his eyes, and the sun was already setting. He leapt up, confused. A whole day was gone. He remembered the merchant's words. You will never see that tomorrow. For a moment, fear gripped him. But then he looked at the gold on his table, the silks draped over his chair, the jewels glinting in candlelight. One day lost, he whispered, smiling, but a king's life gained. And thus began his bargain with time. The temptation, the rise gold, changed Adrian overnight. The morning after his first bargain, he strutted through Brackenford's market square draped in silks he had never before dared to touch. Where once he carried a basket of tools, now he carried a pouch of gold that jingled with every step. People turned their heads. Women whispered. Men frowned, their eyes narrowed with envy. The tavern that used to laugh at him fell silent when he entered. Adrian tossed 2 gold coins on the counter, enough to pay for a week's worth of drinks. The barkeep, usually smug, bowed deeply, almost fearful. Adrian's heart soared. For the first time in his life, he felt important. He felt powerful, and all it had cost him was one tomorrow. What is a single day? He thought. When I have 1,000 left to live. The return of the merchant, but gold is a fire that never stops burning. The very next evening, as Adrian sat at his table counting coins, the merchant returned. He stepped from the shadows of the room, though the door was locked, his cloak billowing like smoke. Are you satisfied? The merchant asked. Adrian, drunk on his own wealth, smiled. I've never felt so alive. The merchant's eyes glowed faintly. Then why stop? You see the power of my gift. Trade me more tomorrows, and I will give you more gold. More than kings hoard in their vaults. Adrian hesitated only a moment. He remembered the strange sensation of waking to find a day lost, a gap in his life. It had unsettled him. But he looked at his gold again, and greed drowned his unease. How many can I sell? Adrian asked. The merchant unrolled the parchment, which seemed longer now, the edges curling with smoke. As many as you desire. Adrian signed away 10 tomorrows. The ink bled into the parchment like veins filling with blood. The merchant pressed a second chest of gold into his arms. When Adrian woke, entire weeks had vanished. His neighbors looked older. Trees bore fruit that yesterday had been blossoms, but on his table, gold glittered in mountains. And so he silenced his doubts with treasure. The feast of envy within months, Adrian became the richest man in Brackenford. He bought land, cattle, and the finest wines from distant kingdoms. He hired servants to carry his things, musicians to play for him, and guards to watch his doors. One evening, he threw a feast to announce his new status. The villagers who once mocked him now came dressed in their best, desperate for his favor. They ate at his long tables laden with roasted boar, fresh bread steaming from the oven, and goblets of golden ale. They laughed, toasted him, called him my lord. Adrian sat at the head of the table, a golden crown he had commissioned resting on his brow. But as he looked down the rows of faces, a hollow ache pierced him. His true friends were gone, his family absent. The people who cheered him were strangers, their smiles sharp, their laughter empty. Still, he told himself, this is the price of greatness. I am no longer ordinary. Time slipping, yet something gnawed at him. He began to notice missing moments. He would wake to find his sister's child taller, his neighbor's hair grayer. He would find harvest festivals had come and gone without him. Sometimes he would stumble through the village and hear whispers. He wasn't at his mother's funeral. He didn't even see his brother's wedding. Adrian told himself it didn't matter. He was living better than all of them combined. But late at night, when the candles burned low, he caught himself staring into the mirror, his face heavier, older than he remembered. One evening, as he stood before that mirror, the merchant appeared once again, reflected beside him. You're changing? Adrian whispered, horrified. The merchant's smile stretched unnaturally wide. Every tomorrow you sell is time cut away from you. Did you think you could spend days like coins and remain untouched? Adrian's chest tightened. For the first time, he asked, what happens when I run out of tomorrows? The merchant leaned close, his eyes blazing. Then you will have lived like a king. Is that not better than dying poor? The spiral of greed, despite the warning, Adrian could not stop. Each time he grew restless, each time he saw another villager gain a scrap of happiness he did not have, he returned to the alley and signed more parchment. He skipped days, then months, then years. Entire pieces of his life disappeared. But the more time he sold, the greater his empire became. He bought a mansion with marble pillars, fountains that spilled crystal water, halls lined with foreign tapestries. From the outside, he seemed untouchable, a man who had risen from nothing to rule over all he saw. But inside, loneliness festered. He would sit in rooms filled with treasure, the silence pressing against him like stone. Servants moved quietly, afraid of his anger. Visitors smiled at his wealth but never at him. He was rich in gold, but bankrupt in joy. The cracks show one night, as storm clouds roared above, Adrian awoke with a start. He swore he had heard a voice whisper in the dark. He rose and found the parchment lying open on his table. His signatures filled page after page, stretching longer than his memory could count. How many tomorrows have I sold? He whispered. The merchant's voice slithered from the shadows. Enough to make you great, not enough to stop. Adrian spun. The merchant was there, his cloak darker than the night itself. I want them back, Adrian demanded. His voice cracked. I want my tomorrows returned. The merchant's smile was like a knife. What is sold cannot be reclaimed. Time does not move backward, Adrian. It only disappears. Cliffhanger. Adrian sank to his knees. For the first time, gold felt heavy, poisonous in his hands. His empire loomed around him like a prison, every stone built with stolen days. The merchant loomed closer, his shadow stretching across the walls. You still dream of more, don't you? He hissed. Sign again, become greater, or stop now, and watch the wealth you built crumble in your aging hands. Adrian's hand trembled. The quill hovered above the parchment. And then, with a sob, he signed again. The merchant's laughter filled the chamber, rolling like thunder. Adrian believed he was rising to greatness. But he did not see that every tomorrow sold was not only a day lost. It was his soul unraveling. The crumbling empire, the marble mansion, stood like a jewel above Brackenford, its towers rising higher than the church steeple, its halls echoing with wealth. But inside, the silence was deafening. Adrian's servants moved like shadows, bowing quickly and avoiding his gaze. He would pass rooms filled with gold, yet feel emptier with each step. At night, he wandered the corridors. Every tick of the clock stabbed him. Every candle flame seemed to whisper, how many tomorrows remain? He had bought so much, Yet he had lost more than he could measure. The vanished years. One morning, Adrian awoke to find the leaves outside his window red and gold. "Autumn already?" he murmured. But it was spring only yesterday. He rushed into the village, desperate for answers. Children he remembered as toddlers now ran past him as tall youths. Men bore gray hair, women carried lines of age upon their faces. He staggered to his sister's home, but the door was strange, its wood aged. A young woman opened it, his niece nearly grown. "Uncle Adrian?" she asked cautiously. "I haven't seen you in years." Years. The word struck like a blade. He stumbled to the graveyard, his chest hollow. There, beneath a simple stone, lay his mother. He had missed her death. He had missed her funeral. Kneeling in the dirt, his hands shook. Tears carved lines down his face. He had been feasting on gold while the world had moved without him. The return of the merchant, the air chilled. Shadows deepened, and there, beside the gravestone, stood the merchant. "You tricked me," Adrian spat. His voice cracked with rage. The merchant's eyes burned. "I told you the price. Tomorrow for a today. You signed willingly. I want them back," Adrian screamed. "Take your gold. Take everything. Just give me back my days." The merchant tilted his head, amused. "What is sold cannot be reclaimed. Time does not return, Adrian. It only vanishes." Adrian struck the ground with his fists. "Then I am cursed." "No," the merchant whispered. "You are simply greedy." The hollow throne. Adrian tried to cling to his empire. He sat on golden chairs, wore robes embroidered with jewels, ate food carried on silver platters. But each bite tasted like ash. The villagers no longer envied him. They pitied him. Whispers followed him in the market. He wasn't at his own mother's burial. They say he sleeps through years. His wealth is cursed. Children pointed and ran. Old friends crossed the street to avoid him. He had everything, yet he had nothing. The disappearing days, the gaps grew worse. Adrian would sleep and wake to find entire months gone. The harvest came and went. Winters passed without memory. Sometimes, when he opened his eyes, even his servants had changed. Younger ones replacing old, generations turning over before him. And each time he noticed, terror clawed at him. He hurried back to the merchant, begging for more time. "I'll give you all the gold. Just stop it. Stop the skipping days." But the merchant only smiled. "You cannot bargain twice. Time is already mine. What remains is yours, until it runs out." The face in the mirror. One stormy night, lightning split the sky as Adrian faced his reflection. His hair, once dark, was streaked with white. His skin sagged, his hands trembled. "I am not old," he whispered. "I cannot be old." He smashed the mirror, shards scattering across the floor. His reflection stared back from every fragment, each piece showing a man closer to death. He collapsed to his knees. The thunder outside roared, but beneath it he heard the ticking louder, faster, merciless. The last bargain. In desperation, Adrian confronted the merchant in the alley where it had begun. "Please," he begged, clutching the man's cloak. "One more bargain. I'll give you anything. My gold, my land, my blood. Just give me back my tomorrows." The merchant's smile was cold. "Gold means nothing to me. Blood is fleeting. Time alone is priceless. And yours is nearly gone." Adrian's tears fell hot. "Then let me live long enough to fix it. Let me undo the years I've lost." The merchant leaned close, his breath colder than the night air. "Undoing time is not possible. You wasted your tomorrows for treasure. And now, treasure is all you have." The merchant's shadow engulfed him, stretching across the walls like a beast. The final warning days blurred. Adrian felt them slipping even as he held on. His hands weakened, his breath grew shallow. One night, as the moon cast its pale light through his chamber, he heard the merchant's voice again. "The end draws near. You sold your tomorrows, Adrian. Soon, you will wake to find no tomorrow left." Adrian wept, clutching the chest of gold at his side. He pressed the coins to his heart, but they were cold, lifeless. "What good is this?" he whispered. "If I cannot buy even a single day?" Cliffhanger, the candles in his room flickered and died. Darkness swallowed him whole. In the silence, only one sound remained: the endless, merciless ticking of the clock. Adrian's rise had become his ruin, and as his gold glittered in the dark, he finally understood the truth. Wealth is worthless when time itself has abandoned you. Dawn came like a rumor, the kind of thin gray light that doesn't warm the earth, just admits that night has stepped aside. Adrian's chamber was quiet except for the soft rustle of the curtains and the relentless whisper of the clock on the far wall. He listened to it as a condemned man listens to footsteps in a corridor, each tick a polite knock on the door of his remaining hours. He pushed himself upright. His body felt older than the bed. Bones complained, breath scraped. He reached for the chest of coins at his bedside out of habit, the way a drowning man reaches for a stone. He plunged his hands into the glittering cold, then drew them back, ashamed. Gold did not pulse. Gold did not forgive. Gold did not hold your hand when the world asked for your last word. He stood, swaying. The merchant had not appeared in the night, but his absence was a presence, like the memory of thunder long after the storm. Adrian dressed himself without calling for servants. Simple clothes, clean but plain. He tied the cords with trembling fingers and, for the first time in years, opened his door to the morning as a man rather than a lord. The house greeted him with a hollow echo. Rooms that once startled visitors with shining tapestries now sounded like empty vaults. He walked their length as one might walk the aisles of a cathedral before confession. In the mirror near the stairs, he paused. A stranger looked back. A man fashioned by haste and regret, carved not by years of love but by the hard chisel of missing days. He whispered to the stranger, "No more." Adrian left the mansion. Outside, the village of Brackenford was awake and gently noisy. Metal on metal at the smithy, laughter near the bakery, chickens fussing in dust. Somewhere a baby cried. Somewhere a horse stamped a hoof. Life, which does not require any one person's permission to continue, continued. As he stepped into the market square, heads turned. Some villagers looked away out of an old habit of reverence, others from a new habit of pity. He nodded to each as if naming them in a prayer. The faces were a mosaic of time he hadn't witnessed. Children he did not remember becoming teenagers, neighbors who had thinned or grayed, the empty spaces where old friends no longer walked. He went first to his sister's door. He raised his hand to knock, then let it fall. There are knocks too heavy for wood. The door opened anyway. His sister, older and softer at the edges, stood in the threshold with flour on her hands. For a breath, neither spoke. Then she stepped forward and gathered him in her arms with a tenderness that weighed more than any gold he had owned. "Adrian," she said into his shoulder, and the name was a welcome, not a question. "I'm sorry," he answered, and the words broke inside him like a dam. "I missed everything." She pulled back, held his face in both palms, and nodded once. "You are here now." A chair was found for him. Tea steamed between them. His niece, no longer the child from his memory, set down a plate of bread and lingered at the table, curious and cautious, as if he were a story told in the house that had suddenly learned to breathe. Adrian told them the truth. He told it not as a defense but as an accounting. The alley, the cart, the parchment, the trades, the wealth that broadened his walls and narrowed his life. He did not hide the ugliness. He did not polish the edges. When he finished, silence sat with them for a while, respectful as an old friend. His sister's eyes shone but did not spill. "There is still today," she said. He reached across the table and took her hand, then his niece's. "Then today, let me be your brother and your uncle," he said. "Let me buy flour and fetch water. Let me mend what I can with the hours left to me." And so he did. He carried heavy sacks from the mill. He repaired a stubborn hinge. He stood in line at the well and traded small jokes with the people who had once crossed the street to avoid him. When a boy dropped a basket of apples, Adrian knelt and gathered them with the boy, one by one, listening to the sound of fruit returning to wood, the small percussion of living. He stayed through midday, and something unremarkable but glorious happened. Time slowed. Not a miracle, no backward sand, no stolen dawn, but the untheatrical grace of attention, the kind that turns the ordinary into a garden. By afternoon, he began walking. He walked to the graveyard. The grass was honest there, and the wind was an old hymn. He knelt by his mother's stone and laid his palm on the name he had not traced with living fingers for far too long. "I made a fool's bargain," he said. "For gold I could count, I traded days I couldn't see. I thought tomorrow was a crowd that would never thin. I thought I could come late to every important thing and still be welcomed like a prince. I was wrong." A robin hopped near the stone and cocked its head, bright-eyed. Adrian smiled sadly. "If there is a heaven, and if there are clocks there, I hope they forgive the sound of one man finally listening to them." He stood and looked out over the little city of stones, each one a name, each name a story of hours spent or squandered, loved or lost. He realized all at once that the merchant had not invented anything terrible. He had only put a price on what already had one. From the hilltop, he could see his mansion, its white bones glimmering in the sun, and beyond it, the alley where the cart had first appeared, a seam in the village fabric where something from outside the loom had forced its way through. He knew where he needed to go next. The alley was narrower than he remembered, as if time itself had grown shy of that place. It held the damp smell of moss and the quiet of a held breath. Adrian stepped into its shade and felt the old chill climb his spine like a careful hand. The cart was waiting. No horse, no wheels turning, just darkness dressed in wood. The merchant stood beside it, unchanged, as if eternity had built him to a single design and broken the mold. His eyes were a familiar ember. His smile was the old thin blade. "Adrian," he said, the name unfurling like smoke. "You've come to pay respects to what you cannot change?" "I've come," Adrian answered, and was surprised to hear his own voice steady. "To speak plainly." The merchant cocked his head. "Plain speech is rare in alleys." Adrian took a breath. "You are not here for gold. You never were. You deal in time because time is what men spend without counting. I came to give you what I should have given myself. A refusal." The merchant's smile did not falter, but something precise in his expression cooled. "You have no tomorrows to refuse. You have sold what could be sold. The account is nearly closed." "Then hear me anyway," Adrian said, and stepped closer. "I wronged myself, and I wronged the people who loved me. I thought your bargains were a staircase and found a cliff. You showed me the mathematics of regret. For that, I thank you. But I will not buy a single shadow from you again, not for comfort, not for power, not for forgiveness that cannot be yours to sell." The alley did not brighten, and the cart did not fade, but a thin thing like respect passed through the merchant's gaze, swift as a bird, real as one. "Very well," the merchant said softly. "It is an art, to refuse what you once worshipped. Most men only succeed at refusing what they never wanted. I have seen fewer than a handful do as you are doing now." Adrian nodded. "Then I will spend today doing what I failed to do with 100 others." "And what is that?" the merchant asked. "Live," Adrian said simply, "and let my living be a lesson offered freely, not sold." "Lessons," the merchant murmured, "are the only currency I do not take." He stepped aside, granting the alley's exit as if it were a gate he had held shut with his presence alone. "Go then, Adrian of Brackenford. Your last hours are not mine. Spend them with a poet's care." Adrian left the alley. He did not look back. The weight of the merchant's gaze followed him as all weights do, down and then away. He walked to the square and stood upon the old stone well. People glanced up in the way one glances up at a hawk. out of instinct more than interest. He raised his hands not like a king claiming silence, but like a neighbor asking for it. "Friends," he called. I spent what could not be replenished and mistook the bill for a blessing. I traded tomorrows for today, again and again, until the language of mourning became foreign to me. I do not ask you to forgive me. Forgiveness is yours to give or keep. I ask you only to witness what I learned so late that the lesson itself broke my heart. Work slowed. Heads turned. "A day," Adrian said, "is a living thing. It breathes through your attention. If you hold it loosely, it slips. If you hold it too tightly, it suffocates. But if you hold it the way you hold the hand of someone you love, with strength and gentleness, it will walk with you. It will not drag you. It will not run away. You cannot buy a day. You can only keep it company." A few in the crowd looked at their feet. A few looked at the sky. "I sold my company to the hours," he said. "They went on without me. Do not do as I did. When the child asks you to watch him run, watch him. When your father tells a story he has told before, listen as if it were the first time. When your work sits in front of you like a stubborn mule, touch it, start it, move it an inch. If you are tempted to say tomorrow, say 2 minutes instead and begin. And if a stranger offers you the world for the price of a day, ask him what world you will stand in when the days are gone." Silence gathered like dew. No one applauded. This was not an applause kind of moment. It was the kind that later becomes a sentence in a person's private history. That was the afternoon I decided to. Adrian stepped down. An old man touched his arm. A young woman nodded. A child stared at him with the wide eyes reserved for thunder and miracles. He spent the rest of the afternoon giving his treasures away. At first, people refused, suspecting trickery. Then, realizing there were no conditions, they accepted. A cloak for a widow, a coin for a man whose plow had broken, a silver comb for a girl with a braid like a river, sacks of grain for the baker who'd fed a dozen on credit. He watched the gold leave his hands and felt lighter each time, as if he had been carrying a winter that did not belong to him. As evening neared, he returned to his sister's home. They ate together, soup simple as truth, bread kind as a hand. He told stories from the time before he traded time, and they laughed where laughter belonged and fell quiet where quiet was honest. When the dishes were cleared, he asked if he might sit by the door a while to listen to the night arrive, the way one listens to a friend's footsteps on a familiar path. They let him be. He listened to crickets, to the last will rolling past on the road, to the sigh of a house that has decided to rest. The merchant did not come. The clock did. It came like it always had, in the form of that gentle tyranny no man breaks. The next moment, he felt it in his chest, a softness, a loosening. The room sharpened into clarity and then softened into kindness. He looked at his sister, at the line worry had worn and love had mended. He looked at his niece and saw in her face the unspent grace of 1,000 good mornings. He took both their hands, said their names, said thank you, said I'm here as if the sentence were a house, and climbed into it. When the last minute arrived, it did not drag chains. It did not slam doors. It simply asked to be honored. Adrian stood, kissed his sister's brow, squeezed his niece's fingers, and walked outside into the small yard where the night had laid down its velvet. The stars were bright, old coins in a sky that owned them. I am not poor, he said to the darkness. I am paid in full. The air was cool. The grass was a cushion. He lay down beneath the honest choir of the insects, closed his eyes, and let the world keep turning without the need to count it. Morning found him there, still, not cold, as if sleep had perfected its purpose. News moved through Brackenford not like a scandal, but like a psalm. They buried him beside his mother, and the stone they carved was simple. Adrian of Brackenford, who learned late and taught early one day at a time people came for a while, then not as often, and then again, whenever their own clocks grew loud. Some brought children. Some brought apologies. Some brought nothing but themselves. The grass obliged all of them, and the story took root. It became a habit in Brackenford to answer the sentence, "I'll do it tomorrow," with a smile and a question. "What will you do for 2 minutes now?" It became an art to listen when old people repeated themselves. It became a custom to show up to small things, practice recitals, first steps, the return of swallows. And in the market there was an alley people did not avoid so much as nod to when they passed, the way you nod to a danger you have decided to be kinder than. As for the merchant, he went on doing his work where men and women wished to hire him. He offered fair trades, which is to say cruel ones that required no lies. But from time to time, when a hand hovered above the pen, he found the bargain spoiled by a remembrance. A woodcarver who had counted the cost too late and paid the rest in courage. The hand would lift. The alley would remain an alley. And somewhere it pleased the merchant that refusal was still possible in a world he helped tempt. You do not need a midnight cart to be offered a bad bargain. You are offered one every time you tell yourself that later is safer than now. Choose a small beginning over a grand delay. Hold the day like a loved one's hand. Spend attention as if it were gold, because it is. Refuse any trade that asks you to give today away for anything less than a better today. If the story found you at the edge of a postponement, step back from the edge. Start while your heartbeat still applauds you. Put down the bargain and pick up the minute. Because minutes, unlike merchants, are honest. If Adrian's journey stirred something in you, share it with someone who keeps saying, tomorrow. Subscribe to Pulse of Time Stories for more cinematic tales with living lessons. And before this video ends, take 2 minutes, just 2, to begin the one thing you've been saving for later. Your time is your real magic stone.